Ready or Not has a lot of weapons to choose from. However, there's more than you might realize. If you download the mod Sniper or Not, you'll gain access to a number of weapons the devs have locked away. It's easy to see why. Most of these weapons are incomplete, missing sounds, janky animations, or simply not being very useful. But regardless, I'll be discussing all of them in this video. I'm not going to do a tier list for these weapons, because a lot of them are not finished, or completely unbalanced. It wouldn't make sense to rank them when they're all at different stages of implementation. So, let's get started. Starting with the pistols, we have the M2011. In recent years, the 2011 pistol platform has gained popularity in mainstream media. But what exactly is it? Well, let's first talk about the 1911. The 1911 was one of the first semi-automatic pistols, and remains one of the most popular. It was designed by John Moses Browning, and has seen use by militaries, law enforcement, and people who still carry with a shoulder holster. The 1911 is a single-action pistol that fires 7 rounds of 45 ACP. While 7 rounds in the 20th century may have been adequate, it's not enough for the 21st. These days, there are handguns half the size that are capable of holding more than twice the ammo. There were some that decided the 1911 needed an upgrade for the 21st century. So came the 2011. The simplest way to explain the 2011 is that it's a wider version of the 1911 with a redesigned grip that can hold more ammo, while retaining all the benefits of the 1911 platform. 45 ACP variants of the 2011 hold between 10 to 11 rounds depending on the model, and retain the light trigger and ergonomics of the 1911. For most of their lifetime, 2011s have been used for competitions. Their light triggers and ergonomics lend themselves well to competition shooters, and their precision machine parts mean they don't hold up as well to wear and tear seen in duty use. However, in recent years, that's changed. Maybe it was because of advancements in technology. Maybe it was because of John Wick. For whatever reason, there has been a growing amount of 2011s in law enforcement hands. In fact, the LAPD SWAT themselves use a 2011 as their standard sidearm. The STI Tactical Double Stack is the 2011 in Ready or Not. It sports a 4-inch barrel, flared magwell, and red fiber front sight, making the pistol look very nice and easy to shoot. Unfortunately, that's where the similarities with the real thing end. In-game, the pistol only holds 7 rounds, so this version is most likely just a retexture of the 1911. In-game menus suggest that this should be a 10mm model, meaning it should have a 15-round mag. If the pistol had its proper mag capacity, it would be quite an effective handgun, but in its current state, it's just okay. The next pistol is the Glock 18C. In semi-auto mode, it's really not very different from any other 9mm Glock. But of course, what makes this model unique is that it has a full auto setting. By switching the external fire selector to the fun setting, you can expend its 20-round mag in an instant. Now, is this practical? Not really. Its high rate of fire makes it extremely difficult to control recoil, and therefore very hard to shoot accurately. In a law enforcement setting, or any setting really, there would be no practical reason for a full auto 9mm handgun. It's important for anyone to shoot accurately, and you can't do that with a full auto handgun. In the real world, practically no law enforcement agency uses the Glock 18 as their sidearm. In Ready or Not, I don't think it's very useful either. The only practical way I've used it is to keep it on semi-auto mode and take advantage of its 22-round mag. But overall, not a very useful sidearm. The last pistol in this mod pack is the Walther P99. It's a modern semi-automatic 9mm pistol designed by Walther that was introduced in 1997. A number of organizations, primarily law enforcement, have chosen to use this pistol. In-game, the Walther P99 is a great sidearm. It comes with 19-round mags, easy-to-use sights, and a multitude of attachments, including, of course, the suppressor. I was one of 5 people who played GoldenEye on the Wii, so the P99 is close to my heart. Great pistol to use, and gets bonus points for nostalgia. Moving on to the submachine guns, we have the Walther MPL. In the late 1950s, the German company Walther designed and manufactured a submachine gun for military and law enforcement use. This gun was the Walther MPL. It's a direct blowback 9mm submachine gun that uses 32 round mags and has a folding wire stock. It's had a few interesting users, mostly German units, but also the American Delta Force. However, during that time period, another 9mm submachine gun was quickly becoming a very popular option, the H&K MP5. As a result, the Walther MPL was a short-lived gun, with production ending in 1983. In-game, the MPL is a very popular option with the bad guys. It doesn't make a lot of sense why so many of them would use it. It's a relatively rare gun, and can't use any type of attachments. However, being able to use it is kind of neat. One thing I really like about the MPL is its low rate of fire. At 550 rounds per minute, this is not a gun that shoots fast. This makes the weapon very easy to control and hold on target. And while the MPL in-game can attach optics, the iron sights are actually pretty easy to use. Overall, quite an enjoyable weapon to use. The other submachine gun is the Smith & Wesson M76. This is a gun with an interesting story. In the 1960s, the US Navy SEAL's submachine gun of choice was the Swedish Carl Gustaf M45. For the time, it was a perfectly functioning 9mm submachine gun. The issue was its country of origin. Sweden as a country likes to remain neutral in conflicts, and they did not like their gun being used in American wars, specifically Vietnam. So, Carl Gustaf stopped providing the M45 for the US Navy. The SEALs needed a new submachine gun, and fast. Smith & Wesson was asked to make one. The result was the M76. Due to the urgent nature of the request, the gun looks very crude. Welds and rough edges stayed on the final gun, and the finish isn't particularly nice. But these were deliberately ignored in favor of getting guns to the Navy as quickly as possible. The M76 has seen very limited use. They were of course used by the Navy SEALs, and the NYPD also has been seen using them. But in general, the gun never saw much action. In-game, the M76 is also a relatively popular option among criminals for some reason. It fires a bit faster than the MPL, and has a noticeably larger muzzle flash. The M76 also can't mount any attachments. It's an outdated weapon, but it's cool to look at and use. If you want to pretend you're clearing out rat tunnels in Vietnam, this is certainly a good option. With that, we move on to the rifles. This category is the largest and most diverse. Some of these weapons are quite different from each other. The first one is the M16A4. The latest version of the American M16, this gun has seen combat wherever America has. A full stock and 20-inch barrel means that the gun isn't well suited for CQB. But that didn't stop the US Marines. During the Battle of Fallujah, US Marines primarily used the M16A4 wherever they went. Combat was fierce, primarily because a lot of it was in close quarters. In-game, the M16A4 is an interesting weapon to use. The disadvantage of its length is quite apparent in-game. It's more difficult to maneuver the gun around. And since engagement distances are so close in-game, its ballistic advantages over a short-barreled rifle aren't really needed. The gun also doesn't have access to many attachments, only 2 optics and a suppressor. Granted, this gun doesn't appear to be close to finished. A significant amount of the sounds are missing, but I still like using the gun, because it looks cool. I'm a sucker for full-length M16 rifles, and this one is no exception. The next rifle is the quote-unquote M4A1. In actuality, this is the early access version of the Mark 18 Mod 0. Functionally, it's no different from the one in the 1.0 release, except for one difference. For some reason, the old Mark 18 could equip a PMag that held 35 rounds instead of 30. I don't know why. Magpul doesn't make a 35 round mag, but nevertheless, it's handy to have an extra 5 rounds. The next gun we'll be discussing is the AR-18. I assume all of you know the AR-15 and its history, but what's less well known is that Armalite continued to design other rifles after the AR-15. One of these rifles was the AR-18. It was intended as a low-cost alternative to the AR-15, and uses a completely different gas system than the AR-15. The AR-18 uses a short-stroke gas piston system. This is a system that runs cleaner than the AR-15's gas system, and when made by a reputable company, is more reliable. A few militaries, including of course the United States, plan tests for the rifle. However, no military has ever adopted the AR-18 as a standard service rifle. Limited numbers were sold to law enforcement. Perhaps most oddly, one of the most prolific users of the AR-18 was the Provisional Irish Republican Army, or the IRA. While the AR-18 itself wasn't very popular, its short-stroke gas system certainly is. Firearms such as the MCX, HK416, and SCAR all have systems that can be traced back to the AR-18's gas system. In-game, the AR-18 functions quite similarly to the other 5.56 rifles. It's a relatively long weapon, and has access to only a few attachments. Its recoil, for some reason, is also very low. The AR-18 in-game uses mags that appear to hold 20 rounds, but in-game, it has a capacity of 30, though this is likely because the gun is incomplete. Overall, it's kind of neat. For the next category of rifles, we have to rewind time. Before the introduction of the assault rifle and the intermediate cartridge, the general consensus among most militaries was that the bigger the bullet, the better. The battle rifle is a term for a rifle designed to fire a large caliber, by NATO standards, the 7.62 by 51mm cartridge or larger. Battle rifles are effective out to ranges further than an assault rifle and provide more ballistic capability as well. These days, battle rifles are generally not issued widely due to their weight and heavier ammo, though with certain programs, they may see a comeback. The first battle rifle is the FNFAL. We all know the SA-58 OSW in the vanilla game. I know for a fact it's a top choice for many of you. Well, the FNFAL is its larger, older, and better made brother. Designed by the Belgian company FN for the British, the intent was for it to be NATO's service rifle, and for the most part, it was. Countries like Canada, the Netherlands, and other countries
but we're all Rhodesians and we'll fight through thick and thin.
All used the weapon to great effect. And though limited, the FNFAL has seen police use, with some police forces still using it to this day. In-game, the FNFAL functions very similar to the SA-58 OSW. The 7.62 by 51 is an incredibly powerful round, and will take anything down in 1 to 2 rounds. The longer barrel means it's harder to maneuver in close quarters, but it's a downside I'm willing to work around with this gun. It also has a fair amount of attachments available. In fact, this is the only weapon able to equip a loophole Mark IV hammer optic. This optic isn't available in the base game, which is a shame. The hammer scope is a 4x scope that can also mount a 1x optic on top. For wider open maps, this optic would be very useful. As is, the FNFAL is a very good gun, and almost complete. It's only missing certain sounds. Now, remember how I said most NATO countries adopted the FNFAL? Well, there was one very significant exception, the United States. Initially, the US had been interested in adopting the FNFAL. In fact, the 7.62 by 51 round that the FAL fires was actually an American suggestion. In the end, the United States chose an American-made battle rifle instead, the M14. The M14 was introduced to replace the legendary M1 Garand. Looking at it, it seems to take many cues from the M1 Garand, while also making a number of improvements. Featuring a 20-round detachable mag and full auto setting, the M14 was meant to bring the US military into the modern age. However, feedback was mixed, though this can be partially attributed to the scope of the program. The M14 was designed to replace 4 different weapons: the M1 Garand, the M1 Carbine, the M3 submachine gun, and the Browning automatic rifle. Hindsight is 20/20, but it seems obvious that a 20-round battle rifle is not ideal for a submachine gun or light machine gun role. Additionally, there were problems with the gun itself. It was heavy, the woodstock swelled and expanded in the humid conditions of Vietnam, and the full auto setting was basically impossible to use. As a result, the M14 didn't see too much general use. However, it's seen a rebirth in the designated marksman role. Several military units now use the M14, albeit heavily modified, in a DMR role. Law enforcement has also made use of the M14. M14s are a weapon usually seen in the hands of police snipers. For those unaware with how police respond to high-risk warrants, a police sniper may seem excessive, but they're actually a crucial part of law enforcement response to dangerous situations. More on that later. In-game, the M14 is a great-looking gun that can fire 20 rounds of 7.62x51. Just like the FAL, it takes very few rounds to put someone down. A unique feature of the M14 in-game is that you can convert it to the shorter M1A SOCOM 16. I personally think this is one of the best looking guns in the game, and I always change the M14 to this configuration. And one final thing about the M14 in-game. They've replicated the sound almost perfectly. The M14 has a very distinct report, and in-game, it sounds almost identical. Overall, probably my favorite weapon in this mod pack. The final weapon in the battle rifle category is the H&K G3. Like the other NATO countries, Germany was looking for a new service rifle, one that fired the 7.62x51 round. The initial plan was to adopt the FAL, like most other NATO countries. However, two things stopped that from happening. The fact that German and Spanish engineers from the company SetMe had been working on a new rifle, and that the German government couldn't come to an agreement to have the FAL manufactured in Germany. So in the end, the German and Spanish rifle became the Bundeswehr service rifle, dubbed the G3 in Germany. It's also been seen in the hands of numerous other militaries, as well as being used by some police forces. The G3A3 uses a roller-delayed blowback system. This is a relatively unique system for a battle rifle. The system locks the bolt until pressures inside the chamber have dropped to safe levels. It's a somewhat odd inclusion. Weapons with similar systems, such as the MP5, have very low recoil. But on the G3, this roller-delayed system appears to make the recoil much more violent than other battle rifles. In-game, the harsh recoil is very much replicated. It's hard to control, and the muzzle flash is quite substantial. It has access to a few optics, but the iron sights also aren't too bad on the gun. One quirk of the G3A3 in-game is that the gun has 30 rounds in the mag, even though what's being depicted are 20 round mags. But again, this is probably because the weapon is incomplete. Still, it's a pretty fun gun to use. Moving on to the AK variants, we have two. The first is the AK-103. The AK-100 series was meant to be a revitalization for the AK lineup as a whole. Instead of wood, these AKs come with polymer furniture and are available in a number of different calibers. The AK-103 was the 7.62x39 variant, meant to be an upgrade for the venerable AKM. There are a few key differences between the AK-103 and the AKM. At the front, the AK-103 uses a 90-degree gas block rather than a 45-degree one seen on the AKM, since this allegedly makes that component more durable. It also comes with a folding polymer stock and muzzle brake, making the weapon easier to control. And the magazine the gun comes with are polymer rather than steel, making them lighter and easier to carry. The AK-103 is a direct upgrade to the AKM, while maintaining most external parts compatibility. Unfortunately, the AK-103 in-game has no attachments. The recoil is also unrealistically high. It also has a huge muzzle flash. All these factors combined mean that the rifle is incredibly difficult to use. This is a weapon clearly not finished by the devs. I love the AK-103, and I personally hope that at some point, the devs will fully implement it into the game. Another rifle from the AK-100 series is the AK-101. Like the 103, the 101 has the 90-degree gas block, polymer stock, and muzzle brake. The difference is that this AK is chambered in 5.56. This AK was meant to be an export to the US, but was never particularly popular. However, In the past couple years, AKs chambered in 5.56 have seen somewhat of a resurgence thanks to import bans on Russian ammo. In-game, the AK-101 is a fun gun to use. It has almost no recoil, and has a variety of attachments and optics to choose from. It's also the only gun in Ready or Not that allows you to remove the stock. Now, why would you do this? I don't know. In real life, this would make the weapon somewhat easier to use in close quarters, but at the cost of much less recoil control. But in-game, this seems to be purely cosmetic and doesn't affect recoil or handling. There's one more interesting thing about the AK-101. In-game, it's mislabeled as an AK-102. However, I don't actually think this is a mistake. The AK-101 has a 16.3-inch barrel length. While usable in CQB, it's not ideal. The AK-102 is the shortened version of the AK-101, with a 12.4-inch barrel, and makes a lot more sense for police use. This is much more similar to the Mark 18s that many police forces use today. My theory is that the AK-102 is the weapon intended to be in the game, and that the AK-101 within the game files is just a placeholder. And finally, we have the most unique rifle within the game files, the M24. The M24 is the American military designation for the Remington Model 700 rifle. The Remington Model 700 is perhaps the most popular bolt-action rifle ever made, seeing heavy use with military, law enforcement, and civilians. Now, some of you may be wondering what the point of a bolt-action rifle is when semi-auto rifles exist. There are two main reasons: accuracy and reliability. In general, a bolt-action rifle will be more accurate than a semi-auto rifle. A bolt-action rifle has only one moving part, the bolt, and when it moves is up to the shooter. This means that the rifle will have no moving components when fired. This also makes bolt-action rifles generally more reliable than semi-autos, since the shooter is the one that cycles the weapon. They certainly can malfunction, but on average, it's less likely to happen. The obvious disadvantage to bolt-actions is that they are slower on delivering follow-up shots. These days, bolt-action rifles are usually found in the hands of snipers. I've spent a lot of time talking about how SWAT assaulters usually use smaller weapons for CQB. However, police snipers are a crucial part of law enforcement. Compared to military snipers, police snipers differ in a few key ways. They don't utilize stalking to get to a shooting position, their typical engagement ranges are much shorter, and if they do need to shoot, first round shot impacts are very important, particularly in situations such as a hostage rescue. Like military snipers, police snipers rarely shoot. Their main job, and most important job, is to observe and relay information without being seen.
No, he's trying to get his head out farther out. Both hands were clear.
They also provide cover for their teammates, and have the ability to end situations while not being visible to a suspect. Unfortunately, with Ready or Not's map design, a bolt-action rifle is basically useless. There are very few maps with long enough sightlines to justify using a bolt-action over any of the semi-auto rifles. As is, the M24 in Ready or Not is not a weapon you pick for its practicality. You pick it for other reasons.
Oh, baby, it's triple! Oh, yeah!
There's one shotgun available in this mod pack, the Izmash KSK. This is a shotgun based on the well-known Saiga 12. Shotguns that are AK pattern have been manufactured in Russia since the 90s. The idea is simple, yet innovative. Design a shotgun around AK controls, so that anyone that knows how to use an AK will be able to learn the shotgun quickly. There are other advantages compared to a conventional shotgun. AK pattern shotguns feed from removable mags, making them much faster to reload. And aftermarket rails means AK pattern shotguns can mount attachments much easier than conventional shotguns. The Saiga 12 and its variants have seen use by Russian police. It's also been seen in the hands of French counterterrorism units. And even American police units have procured the weapon. So believe it or not, its appearance in Ready or Not isn't completely unrealistic. In-game, the KSK is a semi-automatic shotgun that can reload much faster than a conventional shotgun. So, it's very good. 10-round mags and fast reloads means you can put down rounds very quickly. And if you really want to obliterate someone, the KSK has a full auto setting.
Jesus Christ.
The only thing I don't like is that the only optic available is this garbage AliExpress optic. But other than that, great weapon. Our last category is the light machine gun. Now, do light machine guns have a role in law enforcement?
The law requires that I answer no.
But we're going to talk about them anyways. The first one is the RPD. This is a light machine gun that fires the 7.62x39 round. It was adopted in 1948 and saw heavy use in Vietnam by the Viet Cong. An interesting story about these RPDs was that American MAC-V SOG operators used modified RPDs on patrol, as they were lighter than their issued M60s. Does it have any relevance to law enforcement? No, but I thought it was a cool story. In-game, the RPD feels ridiculous in the hands of a SWAT operator. It uses a 125 round drum mag, and you can bring a ton of them. This is a gun you'll never run out of ammo for. If you know our room is full of hostiles, just point it at the door and hold the trigger. The 7.62x39 round means rounds will punch through most doors and walls with ease. If you want to keep yourself safe, at the expense of everyone else, the RPD is a great choice. The other light machine gun is the M249 SAW. This machine gun is an American classic. It fires a 5.56 round and has been used by almost every branch of the United States military, as well as many other countries. To this day, it's one of the most prolific light machine guns in the world. The reasons why are quite simple. It's relatively light, holds a lot of ammunition, and can fire for a relatively long time before overheating. For most police forces, a SAW is overkill. However, there are a couple law enforcement agencies that have them. The Brazilian BOPE have made use of the SAW. The BOPE typically deals with extremely violent criminals in favelas, meaning their operations sometimes look more like military raids rather than police operations. So, their usage of the SAW makes sense. What makes less sense is the other police unit that uses the SAW. Chinese SWAT equivalents have been seen with what appears to be a knockoff SAW. Allegedly, this SAW clone is chambered in the Chinese 5.8x42 round, their intermediate cartridge meant to compete with 5.56. Why would they need this? I don't know, maybe for enforcing TikTok usage or something. But generally speaking, police forces do not use belt-fed machine guns. And in game, it's very apparent why. With 200 rounds and a full auto setting, it's almost guaranteed that everyone in the vicinity is getting hit. As a practical law enforcement weapon, the SAW isn't that great, but when you're tired of doing non-lethal runs and want to kill everything that moves, this is your gun. So, that's all the hidden weapons of Ready or Not. Some are good, some are great, and some are just pure fun. If you haven't already, download the mod and give the weapons a try. At minimum, you'll have a good time.